So sorry if you had any issue joining this call, right? So I think some people are having issues joining on mobile due to the Riverside app. So regardless, I'll just get started, right, with the community call. And thank you all for joining. This is the third Sovereign DBaaS Community Call. And yeah, I'm excited, and I believe that you're excited, even if you're watching this right later on after we've uploaded on YouTube. And today we're going to be talking about the long-term cost, right, of managed DBaaS versus sovereign DBaaS. So we'll go over it in detail, right, and look at some numbers, right? I know that everyone is interested in numbers, especially talking about cost, not just from a vague perspective. So, if you've been a member of the Sovereign DBaaS community, right, or you're just finding about the community now, so this is a little bit about me. I'm Divine Odazie. I'm the community manager. I'm a technology evangelist at Several Nines, a company that helps organizations take control of their data. And also, I have experience with Kubernetes, managed services like AWS, and also been involved in the community for a while now. So, like I mentioned, right? So this is how the call will go, right? So first of all, talk starts by introducing it's good to have some understanding, right? Fundamental understanding on what DBaaS is, right? The managed DBaaS and sovereign DBaaS. Then we look at the key factors that influence long-term cost, right? And also talk about the total cost of ownership, right, of sovereign DBaaS and the managed DBaaS today, like I mentioned, with facts and figures, because we need to understand those numbers when we make those decisions, especially as engineers or as decision makers, right? So to get started, what is DBaaS? So managed DBaaS. So managed DBaaS, I think whether you're new in the tech industry or you've been here for decades, right? You must have heard of managed DBaaS. But just some housekeeping, it is a cloud-based service that allows users to create and access databases without having to worry about the underlying infrastructure, right? So organizations use managed DBaaS for two major reasons. So one is ease of setup, right? And the next one is availability and scalability. But then again, in our previous community call, right, we did an in-depth comparison between deploying Postgres on a managed DBaaS or just using compute instances from these cloud providers. And we saw that you can also have this ease of setup and availability and scalability, right, with just compute instances is that you are not requiring you to be locked in. I'll look more on that. So here is a link, right, a QR code rather, to scan to watch the previous community call on YouTube. So we talked about Postgres on Aurora, AWS Aurora, Azure Cosmos DB versus using just EC2 or Azure VMs, right? So moving on, next, understanding what sovereign DBaaS is. So some fundamentals, right? So if SaaS is a subscription-based model, right, where software applications are hosted and managed by the third party, the provider, right, and you can access them via the internet, via your mobile phone, or via your web browser, right, on demand, right. Then database of a service as a service, right, DBaaS, right, is cloud computing managed offering that provides access to databases, right, without requiring the setup, like I talked about, managed databases and stuff. Then, if you think about sovereignty, right, what does sovereignty means? By default, once you get the word sovereignty, right, if English is either your first language or your second language or third, right, you must have heard the word sovereignty. And what comes to mind is autonomy, right, control. And you think about countries like, okay, I'm currently in the UK. United Kingdom is a sovereign kingdom, right? I'm Nigeria. Nigeria is a sovereign country, right? So then, what does that mean in the digital space, right? It means the ability to have control over your digital destiny. Basically, that's the summary. So basically, the hardware, right, the software, and everything around it, the control on what to create, how to destroy or like move and make changes, right, and without being affected by several factors, and also without paying so much cost, right? Which is one of the fundamental reasons of having a sovereign DBaaS instead of managed DBaaS. So with that fundamental set, right? So what is Sovereign DBaaS? Sovereign DBaaS gives you the control over your data stack, right? So you remember what I mentioned just a few seconds ago, control, deciding your destiny, right? On where you deploy your workloads and how you configure them according to your application needs, right? And or your organization requirements. So in our first community call, right, we delved in depth, right, into discussing what Sovereign DBaaS is, what it entails, its key features, and everything, right, and how it offers flexibility to organization. So the results of Sovereign DBaaS is you can achieve the promise of open source, right, and source available databases. Yes, Postgres is open source, but taking Postgres open source on its own, right, and deploying it at scale, right, without using without automation, right? It's with manual process is a challenge. It's not doable, and hence people go to sovereign use managed DBaaS services. But sovereign DBaaS comes as an alternative idea, right? That you can do this without having to be locked in, right, on managed DBaaS. So you can scan this QR code and watch the very first community code that introduced the idea of sovereign DBaaS, the why, the what, and the how, right? Then next, I don't know at any point if anyone have any question, whether you're watching this call now, you can just drop your questions on the chat, or you are going to be watching it later on YouTube or wherever we share the recordings. So you can just drop your comments, and someone, most likely will be me, will answer your questions. If you're also in the community, you can also drop your questions there too. So next, key factors influencing long-term cost. So there are several factors, right, that can influence cost, right, especially working with software, right, and database software that has different, you're not only dealing with the database on its own, like Postgres, right, also the infrastructure and the people that are using the database or trying to access the database, writing the queries, the software engineers and stuff, right. There are several factors that can affect the cost of DBaaS, right. So we'll look at them. The first we want to look at is the infrastructure and operational cost, right? So on a managed DBaaS, right? So pricing, let's look at pricing. So pricing of infrastructure tends to start out small because like as a pay-as-you-go model, right? So you can easily spin up an RDS cluster, either multi-AZ or so, right? But as you scale out and grow, right, this price can rise tremendously, which obviously you don't want on a long term because you'll be paying a premium, and that's now being there, having your infrastructure growing, right, on that's on a managed DBaaS leads to vendor locking, right? And if you want to like switch, right, if you check some conversations on Reddit and follow the tech community, you hear a lot about cloud exit. Aside from cloud exit, more people wanting to move away from managed services, right, managed DBaaS, right, because of the high cost they are paying or some challenges and stuff. And to move, right, there's a high switching cost because you've become dependent, right? Your organization, your team have become dependent on that particular service, right? But on the sovereign DBaaS, right, you have more control, right? There's no vendor locking, and that enables you to choose where you want to deploy your application, right? Where you want to deploy your databases, whether you want to choose public cloud, right? You can also deploy on AWS using just compute instances like we talked about in the previous call, or you can deploy on-prem, or you have a hybrid model, right, and still have control and flexibility. Okay, if a particular deployment method get expensive at a particular point in time, you can easily move, right, and switch to a different one. Or you have control and flexibility, right, and that makes the switch cost, right, is easier, and it's not as expensive and moving from one cloud provider, like let's say you're using AWS as an example, right, managed DBaaS, and moving to Azure Cosmos DB, right. So the switching cost is not as expensive as that because you're not dependent on a vendor, right. And another important thing, yes, Postgres on RDS is it's not the vanilla Postgres that you get, the open source Postgres. It's Amazon's version of Postgres, right? So that also is something to keep in mind, right, when using a DBaaS service. But another thing to note, right, operational costs, right, probably right not be different between the two between the two of them, depending on how your team is and the size of your data over time, right? And you need to hire people to manage this, to use these managed services, right? So they are managed doesn't mean that everything is automatic, right? There's still some effort that's required from your end and your team. So the next is compliance and license cost, right? So on managed DBaaS, right, there's a there's a cost on regulatory risk, right? Like for example, the US Cloud Act. So you all know that data is subject to laws, right, in countries and regulations. But then again, once the data is created, right, and once it's shared, you don't know where the data may end up, right? And you don't know what country the data will pass through when using some of these managed services, right? So that can bring about issues and fines, right? And regulatory risks, and also compliance. So let's say it's compliance from a security perspective, right? It may require additional charges like using RDS and wanting to use the AWS key KMS, right? Yeah, for managing keys, right, and rotating keys. There's some cost to that, right, and some other external costs that comes with like meeting compliance of a certain country or a certain industry, right. But on a sovereign DBaaS, right, so the result of sovereign DBaaS is for you to meet this compliance, right? Because of you have the ability to distribute both sensitive and non-sensitive workloads wherever they meet the best compliance requirement, right? And then again, you can also manage this from a single pane of glass, so you are not having to worry about logging into different interfaces or using different tools, right? In order to manage your database environment, whether they be on-prem, in a private cloud, or in a public cloud, right? And also, because of this, the result is lower risk, legal risk, and provides better protection against like issues, right? And having more control. And if issues do occur, right, you can mitigate them faster because of that control and flexibility. Then the next factor that influence, right, manage influence the long-term cost is data transfer and egress costs, right? So on a managed DBaaS service, with managed DBaaS, right, we all know when you're spinning up an instance on Azure or any kind of service, right, and you want to have some data go out at a particular time, right? And you know, with the databases, you especially in you're implementing a highly available database. You have nodes in different availability zones, right, or region in some cases, right, and there's that cost, right, for moving data across these regions, right? And those costs tend to be expensive depending on the size of data, right? And also, if you're good, you have a globally distributed infrastructure, right? Globally distributed database, right? The cost with regards to using a managed service, right, or wanting to use like multiple clouds, right, and using multiple cloud managed services and replicating this data is quite expensive, right? Data transfer costs. Now, on a managed DBaaS, from a managed DBaaS perspective, you see that there is little to no egress cost, right? Because you have control of your infrastructure, right? Whether you deploy on-prem or you're just using the EC2 instances, and we'll look more into that, right? So you can also decide to use, I would say, cloud providers, right? That offer favorable pricing, right? Maybe DigitalOcean. We all know DigitalOcean is a cheaper cloud provider aside from the bigger hyperscalers on Linode, right, or other cloud providers that are out there. So, and also data can be kept where it's originated, and you can manage it in a consistent manner, right, in establishing data governance. So you don't have to worry about transferring data depending on your egress cost, rather depending on your infrastructure and your application needs. So the next factor that influences long-term cost, customization and control, right? So we have mentioned this, right, by passing since talking about this section of the call, right? So with managed DBaaS, we all know there's limited customization, right? There's a limit to what you can do, right? And this removes the opportunity, removes the optimization opportunity, right? And also, if you want more features and added features, like I mentioned, the KMS, right? There's an added fee to it. Or let's say for AWS Aurora Postgres, right? For example, you have this tool called Performance Insights, right? You can use it to get insight on your database and all, but they are mostly general metrics. So if you want more complex, or not, rather than complex, more custom metrics, right? You see yourself having to use like an external tool, right? Maybe Datadog that comes with its own cost, right? In order to get custom metrics from your databases, right? So that is something that you don't have to worry about or deal with, right? With Sovereign DBaaS, and you have more options of tools that you can integrate. Like for example, if you like another example is still Aurora, right? So Aurora Postgres does not PMM, right? Integrates with Postgres, but it doesn't integrate with PMM, which is the Percona monitoring tool, right? Integrates with Postgres, but doesn't integrate with Aurora Postgres, right? As a flavor. So that is those are things to keep in mind, right? But with Sovereign DBaaS, we have greater control, right? More flexibility, and you can mix and match whatever tool you want, from open source tools to off the shelf tooling, right? And local support, right? In the sense of like if you've used like some of these cloud providers, right, that are from a specific region. Let's say you're implementing your Sovereign DBaaS on a smaller scale, using computing instance with a smaller scale cloud provider, right? If stuff do happen, right, they're closer to you, right? You can resolve issues faster, right, and deal with problems faster, right? So these are the key factors that influence long-term cost of either you want to use a managed DBaaS or Sovereign DBaaS. So as is our way in this call, so if you have any question at this stage, you can just drop it in the chat and I'll do my best to answer them. So moving on. Also, if you're watching this call later on, you can just drop a comment on YouTube and ask a question, or you join the community to ask a question, and one of the community members or I myself will be sure to answer you. So the next part, right, and like the meat of this call, the total cost of ownership of managed DBaaS and also Sovereign DBaaS, right? While it actually makes a lot of sense, right, to calculate the cost of doing managing a database, it's not something that many people do, right? And it's people in most cases, companies, organization teams calculate the cost after they are already locked in, right? And you can see a lot of those conversations on platforms like Reddit and Quora and stuff, right? They calculate the cost after they are locked in or they are paying too much, right? And they start to think about it. So the easiest method to like gain insight into like the total cost, right? Into the cost of running a database is to kind of do like a total cost of ownership analysis, right? So you might have theories on like what is the greatest cost factor, right? But then again, you need to actually do the calculation to know, right, and kind of think ahead, right? And this is something you need to know, right? And we can all agree on each app, right, has unique needs, requirement, loads, and there's no really a ballpark to say like, okay, this particular analysis is the same for all kinds of organizations, right, or all kinds of applications, right? You might be working for a company that offers e-commerce services, right, or a telco company, right, or any kind of company, right, with a different an app that uses it, like you have different skill level of engineers and stuff. There are so many other factors, right? So we're going to look at this in a different way. And also, Another important thing to know, right? And let's set the levels for this the future of this call, right? Long term, right, we can all agree is a minimum of 3 years. So that is the threshold, right? Or let's say the maximum we are going to use 3 years, right, to do the analysis we see in this call. And seeing that each app is unique, right? Let's create a scenario of a fictional company that's named Doe Telco. Right? So they are launching a new product. They are located in Hyderabad, India, and okay, they need a multi-AZ 3-node Postgres cluster, right, for high availability, and they're prioritizing speed and latency, right? So it's important for them to be closer to their users, right, in Hyderabad, right? They don't have a dedicated DBA for the product, and they are deciding whether they want to collocate, self-host, right, or use a managed DBaaS, right, to deploy this. So let's first of all look at how they will collocate, the cost on collocating in Hyderabad, right? So let's first of all start with the hardware. So a good hardware we can agree on for like a database cluster, right? Is the Dell Arrows 750, right? And this particular hardware rack is designed for mixed or intensive workloads, right? Like databases, right? Or high intensive applications that require high reads and writes, right? I/O. So the hardware you say the hardware is configured to 6 gig of memory, right? And we have 480 gig of SSD, right? And this particular hardware rack is 2 units. So you can get this hardware, right? If you check the Dell website, you can get this hardware configuration for roughly about $8,000, right? So we'll be using US dollars for this calculation, right, and analysis. So now where we host the the hardware, right? So looking at the colocation cost. So the colocation, seeing that Doe Telco, right, wants a multi-AZ deployment, they will host each of the nodes, right, in different co-location centers in the Hyderabad region, right? So co-location cost, so a 2U 300 power watts, right? Comes with support and all other features, right, you would require in a co-location center, right? And you also know like 300 watts, the average database server consumes about around 200 watts, right? So this cost in Hyderabad, if you we this analysis was done checking co-location centers in Hyderabad. It costs about 107 USD, right, per month, right, for a particular 2U rack that gives this support, right. Then another important thing, right, is as mentioned, major reason people use managed DBaaS is because of like the ease of setup, right? Because you can deploy, you can write scripts, right? You can use Terraform to provision an infrastructure, right, and deploy database or software. But when the two operations, right, when you think about, right, replicating the data, handling backups, verifying if these backups that you take are important, right? So that is where like that is what make people use, right, manage DBaaS service, because they automate all this process for you, right. But then again, there's a tool, right, called cluster control, which we've been talking about throughout our community calls, that can help you do this, right, whether it be on-prem, right, or using public cloud or hybrid cloud or a private cloud, right. You can automate the installation of the databases, right. You also get observability features to know what's happening with your database, or database metrics, and also system metrics, and also automate the replication of this data, right, with automatic failover, automatic node recovery, and all those features that you need, right, to have a high available database, right. So, and this cluster control per node cost about $3,500 per year, right, and you can also have a pay as you go model, in the sense that you pay on a monthly basis, right. And then another thing, right, we need to consider, seeing is a co-location installation, right, in multiple co-location environments. So to factor in transportation, and in the Hyderabad region, the average transportation cost, right, is about $30 per month, right, for an engineer, right, or someone from the organization to go to the location, right. So these are the sources so that you can also use to verify like the cost of each of these, right, these analysis that we just did, right. So putting all these together, you see, right, that the cost, the hardware cost is about capex, right? The upfront cost is about $2,400 for the three nodes, right? So, and also it's also important to keep parts, right, for replacement in case like things go wrong or unexpected failure or drops, right, while transporting or moving the hardware, right. Then looking at the operating cost per year, so the co-location environment, so $107 per month times 12 times 3, so you have about $300,852 per year, and transportation 30 times 12, $368 per year. Then the cost of control for the three nodes, right, so about 10,500 per year, right, which gives you about $14,712 per year operating cost. So adding the operating cost, right, and multiplying the operating cost by 3 and also adding the upfront cost, so to give you a total cost of ownership about $69,336, $69,336, right? So that looks like a huge number, right? And but wait till you see the numbers of the managed DBaaS, right? So now, so yeah, so this is the total cost of ownership collocating in Hyderabad. You can take these sources to verify the cost of collocating in the Logos Systems collocation center, and also the transportation cost and the hardware cost, right? So now, Amazon RDS, right, on demand, setting it to the Hyderabad region, right? So using the same DB instance of say DB instance of similar requirement, right? So you can see the memory, 64 gig RAM memory, and 16 cores, right? The total cost, right, of that is about $86,000, roughly about $89,000 per month, right? Then the SSD using a GP2, right? SSD, so the 400 gigabyte, right, of storage, of EBS storage. The total cost is about 312, and that brings about $9,000 per month, right? Or to run a managed DBaaS that fits that similar specification of the co-located environment. And in 12 months, right, that is about 110 $110,000, right? But then again, you can say that, okay, yes, you can lock in discounts with the reserved instances, right, on a 3-year term, right, or spot instances, right? But do you want to lock in for 3 years? Like how you can't see the foreseeable future. So if you look at the hardware, right, from a hardware perspective, you can always use that hardware for like any other thing at that particular time, right? You can always use the hardware. Let's say if you're underutilizing it, you can use more of the resources, deploy other applications or something else, right? So, but then again, being locked in, right, on this on RDS for 3 years to get that particular discount is not something is what many people are crying out on at this particular time. So the total cost, right, of ownership for about 3 years, multiplying this number by 3, is about 330,000, right? $330,462. So think about the $66,000 we just talked about for 3 years, right, in a co-located environment. So you can see the gap, right, the pricing, the cost gap. So what if, right, you can't afford the upfront cost of co-location, right, or an organization, a small startup that just wants to use that want to use the public cloud, right, and they can't afford the upfront cost. So you know the upfront cost was about for the co-location was about $25,500, right, buying the hardware and stuff, right. So if an organization can't afford that, they can use a pay-as-you-go model with cloud instances, right? So still using AWS, for example. So the EC2, same EC2 instance configuration, and factoring in data transfer, right? Intra-region data transfer, and also outbound data transfer to the internet, right? So you can see the total cost. And also, it's important to keep in mind all these calculations were done with the AWS pricing calculator, right? So you can just Google the AWS pricing calculator and go in there and do this calculation yourself, right? And see the total cost of this infrastructure, right? So this is a shared instances, operating system Linux, right? And the EBS storage, and also being using 100%, like with the instances running 100% at a time, right? So with this, right, then again, the next thing you think about, you have these EC2 instances. The next thing you think about is database software installation and the database lifecycle management, right? So, yeah, and the database lifecycle management, right? So that is where a tool like cluster control still comes into play, right? So removing the upfront cost, right, of dealing or having to pay about $25,000. So an organization can just pay around less than $5,000 per month, right? Or someone starting with that particular Doe Telco can pay that particular amount per month, right, and bring their cost to about 36,323 US dollars per year, and multiply that by 3 years, right? So we're just using, we give a ballpark and like a strict requirement, right, for this particular installation, right? So not starting small and growing, but just starting on a go with a multi-AZ environment, right? So now this is also is important to know that these are estimates, and these estimates were done with the AWS pricing calculator. So about for 3 years, multiplying 36,323, right, by 3, you get about $108,000, right, $109,000, right? So using cloud instances, and you can see that it's actually cheaper, right, to host on-prem, right? But then again, if you cannot afford the upfront cost or the mobility cost or that, right, you can use cloud instances, right, provided by the cloud providers, right? So it may be AWS may be more expensive in your case. You can use DigitalOcean, or in Nigeria there's a cloud, like I mentioned, I'm Nigerian, there's a cloud service provider called Layer 3, right? So they are obviously cheaper, right? If I want to build a startup that caters, John Doe wants to build a product that caters to the Nigerian, John Doe Telco wants to build a product that caters to the Nigerian market, right? So they can get those compute instances, right? Or use a collocated environment and still get it cheaper, right? And using a managed instance, right? And having cluster control as the control plane to manage the deployment and the life cycle of the entire application. So to putting all this together, right? So final comparison, relative cost savings. So you see, like comparing RDS Postgres, right, and colocation, right? You see that in a 3-year term you save about $260,000, right? And you're managing these databases with cluster control, right? Also, using EC2 instances is more expensive than colocation, right? With I estimate, but it's tremendously cheaper than using RDS, right? And you can see that implementing a sovereign DBaaS, right, is relatively easy today, and is more cost effective on a long term, right? Thinking less about just starting now, right? But then again, if you want to start small, you can also use cloud instances to start small. And as mentioned, each of the tool we use, right here, cluster control, has a pay-as-you-go model, right? And you can pay as you go and not having to worry about the upfront cost, or let's say your environment grow, right? And the cost would definitely be cheaper than the requirements we set for this, right? So it's cheaper to deploy databases on-prem, right, today, because this cloud cost has gone, I wouldn't want to use the word outrageous, right, but that is how it seems that is how it is from, aside from the calculator, from personal experience and experiences of people that are working with these cloud databases, right, on a day-to-day, right, and that is why we are actively building the Sovereign DBaaS community to contribute and like share knowledge and help each other out as we manage our databases, right, at scale, and so we pay less and have more control, right, and sovereignty, which everyone requires, right, whether as an organization, as a person, or as a region or a country as a whole, right. So choose where you want to deploy, right, and find the tools you want to uh, manage your databases, right? And manage DBaaS is not the only answer that we have today. So if there's any question, you can always ask. You can ask by joining the community. You can also ask on this live call now. And you can ask if you're watching this video on YouTube later on. You can drop a question in the comments, and we definitely answer, or anyone from the community will answer you, and we can you can learn from that, and we can also learn from your experience, right? Because like I said, every app, every organization, like, has different requirements, right? So if you're not in the community, you can scan this QR code rather, to join the community. You can always email me at divine@several9s.com, or check out the community on LinkedIn, the Sovereign DBaaS community. With just a quick search, you'll be able to see the community and join and learn more. We have different people from different walks of life, different industries, some people from Starbucks, and different organizations like Verizon and other organizations, right, that manage databases, both from beginner level and also experts and people that will run teams, right? So yeah, thank you very much for taking your time. I'll just wait a few more minutes to check if there's any question. So if there's no any other question, so you can say this is the end of today's community call. So in the future, next community call, we'll be bringing on a member of the community to share about his experience managing databases on or at scale at an airline. We'll share more on that later in the community. And we have future community calls planned out for community members as we grow this community. And also, if you're listening now and you are interested, you want to join the community, and you want to also share your knowledge and experience, right, feel free to scan this code, join the community, and I will definitely reach out to you immediately you join, right, or a few minutes or hours after you join, right, and you can let me know what you want to talk about, and we can work on something, and you can come share, and as we help everyone implement a sovereign DBaaS and have more control over their data. And yeah, thank you very much, and do have a great rest of the evening, morning, and the weekend that is coming. Thank you. I'll stop recording now.